Let's eat together as a new family. Steven's family is indulgently enjoying delicious steak. But in front of me, there's just a familiar cup of chicken noodle soup. Rachel, sitting across from me, looks down in silence. Steven's mom peers at her face. Oh, Rachel, what's wrong? Don't worry, it's fine. Let's eat. From now on, we'll be your family instead of your mother. Rachel gives Steven's mom a cold look, ignores her words, and walks briskly over to me, saying in a clear voice, "Let's go home." I nod in agreement. All right. As we head toward the entrance, flustered Steven blocks our path. Rachel. What are you doing? What do you mean, we're going home? To avoid wasting any more time. Huh? Do you know what you're saying? Steven raises his voice in frustration and grabs Rachel's arm. Rachel shakes off his hand and shouts loudly. Do you even know who you're dealing with? Then, Rachel and I reveal a certain truth to Steven's family. I am Natalie, 50 years old. Since losing my husband to illness 18 years ago, I have raised my daughter, Rachel, on my own. Rachel was only 7 when my husband passed away. I didn't want her to struggle in the future just because she had a single parent, so I aimed to be financially secure. I also wanted to fulfill my husband's dream. With that single-minded goal, I relied on my parents and after-school care while working tirelessly. During those years, I made Rachel feel very lonely. Why can't you be home waiting for me, Mom? All the other moms say how was school when their kids come back. This is what Rachel tearfully said to me one summer day when she was in 2nd grade, biting her lower lip. I felt like I had been hit over the head. I had been so consumed with work that I almost lost sight of what truly mattered. Rachel was the most important thing, and I had made her feel this way. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry. After that, I tried to reduce my work hours as much as possible. Even so, compared to families with both parents, we had less time to relax together. Even when I came home early, I sometimes had to work at home. I'm sorry, Rachel. I return home after working overtime and quickly take care of dinner and a shower. After hurriedly putting Rachel to bed and finally taking a breather, I suddenly notice Rachel's peaceful sleeping face. Seeing that, I was overwhelmed with an indescribable sense of guilt. She was still in elementary school. Yet I couldn't let her fully express her need for affection. But I had to work to make a living. If I collapsed, our home would fall apart. Every day was a struggle. However, by the time Rachel graduated from middle school, my job had stabilized, and we were financially secure. When Rachel became a high school student, she was quite independent and began worrying about my health, often saying, "Mom, aren't you working too much?" I felt both pride and a bit of guilt seeing Rachel mature beyond her years. From then on, Rachel continued to grow, walking confidently on her own path without me having to worry. This year, Rachel turned 25. She had settled well into her job and was accustomed to living alone. Kids become independent faster than parents think. If this keeps up, Rachel might get married soon. Imagining Rachel in a wedding dress brought tears to my eyes. Yet, I hadn't heard any romantic stories from Rachel. I figured marriage was still a while off, until one day, Rachel contacted me. At first, it was casual talk, but then she fell silent for a moment before shyly saying, "Actually, there's someone I'm thinking about marrying." I was so surprised I nearly screamed. I was genuinely happy about Rachel's sudden romantic news. Hey, who is it? I wanted to ask her a million questions. But I restrained my curiosity and asked calmly. After a brief pause, Rachel answered. He's a senior colleague at my current job. He's quite competent. He confessed to me, and we've been dating for a while. Oh, he sounds wonderful. I might be biased, but I believe Rachel has grown up to be a smart and kind person. I've heard nothing but good things about her from people who know her. Many clients specifically request Rachel as their account manager because she's so thorough and reliable. Knowing how dedicated Rachel is to her work made me proud as a mother. There's so much to learn from him professionally. I see. Rachel's voice was full of excitement when talking about him. I was curious about the man Rachel chose. I wanted to know more. After all, this was the first boyfriend Rachel had ever mentioned to me. Despite my curiosity, I didn't want to pressure her, so I didn't ask too many questions. I figured she would tell me more when the time was right. So, I waited. A few weeks after that initial call, Rachel contacted me again. Sorry for the sudden call. I want you to meet him. It was sooner than I expected. I was a bit surprised, but also very happy. Oh, I'd love to. Just tell me when, and I'll be there. I'm so excited. However, Rachel's reaction over the phone was somewhat hesitant. I asked her what was wrong, and she replied cautiously. Just, don't get your hopes up too high. I hope you won't be disappointed. Her response was unexpected. Oh, come on. I'm not that overprotective, and my standards aren't too high. If you chose him, that's good enough for me. Yeah, thanks. The frustrating thing about phone calls is not being able to see the other person's expression. I couldn't tell what kind of face Rachel was making at that moment. Why would such an optimistic child give such a negative preface about introducing her boyfriend to me? It was unlike Rachel. I was concerned, but perhaps she was just nervous. I half convinced myself of this as I eagerly awaited the day to meet Rachel and her boyfriend. And then, the day of the meeting arrived. I'm so nervous. Does my outfit look okay? It's fine, you look great. Besides, I'm the one who's more nervous. We laughed as we looked at each other and headed to a well-known local restaurant. It's a place often used for business meetings. Initially, we planned to meet on a weekend for a relaxed chat. However, he was busy on weekends, so we agreed to meet after work. A bit after we arrived, Rachel's boyfriend showed up. Nice to meet you, I'm Steven. Nice to meet you, I'm Rachel's mother. I'm pleased to meet you. As I bowed, Steven smiled and nodded. He had long, slender limbs and looked sharp in his suit. His hairstyle was modern. His friendly demeanor and polite conversation made him seem like an ideal young salesman. If Rachel chose him, there was no need for me to interfere. Despite Rachel's prior comments making me brace for someone different, I was pleasantly surprised. He seemed like a wonderful person. What had Rachel been worried about? Though we've only been dating a short time, I'm thinking about marrying Rachel someday. I'm really glad to meet you today. I'm glad to meet you too. He's not just playing around, he's considering marriage as well. Hearing that gives me peace of mind as a mother. He was serious, dependable, and entertaining. Even though he's such a nice person, what was Rachel worried about? He really is a great young man, after all. Thinking that, we chatted away. As the amount of alcohol increased and the conversation became livelier, the atmosphere subtly started to change. Steven, now red-faced and in high spirits. Honestly, when I first heard she was from a single-parent family, I wasn't thrilled. But I'm glad her mom turned out to be so nice. Oh, really? I nearly dropped my glass. Even though he had been drinking, I didn't expect such bluntness at our first meeting. My face must have tensed up. Hey. Steven. Rachel hurriedly placed a hand on Steven's shoulder. Steven shrugged it off. It's fine. I'm complimenting her. Rachel, you're always so picky about things like this. It wasn't that Rachel was picky. I silently disagreed. Rachel sighed and held her head in her hands. Steven tends to say the wrong things, sorry, Mom. Oh, it's fine. To say I wasn't affected would be a lie. I've faced prejudice against single-parent families many times. It never gets easier. It always hits me hard. In the slightly tense atmosphere, Steven was the only one enjoying his drinks. It was the first time I felt a sense of unease about Steven. At first, he seemed like an impeccable young man. However, as he continued to drink, he began talking more freely. There were moments that made me want to scratch my head in confusion. Rachel is too good at her job. She's highly regarded at work, but as her boyfriend, it makes me feel overshadowed. Steven said, leaning on his elbow. He didn't seem to notice my bewilderment. Or maybe he didn't care. But Rachel is working hard too, right? I tried to defend her, feeling a bit irritated. Stephen waved his hand dismissively. You don't get it, do you? Rachel works too hard. Besides, don't you think women are more charming when they have a little vulnerability? Like, they're more lovable. Wasn't it like that back in your day? Back in my day, I felt like I was being treated as an old person. Not entirely inaccurate, but it didn't feel good. Rachel glared at him, trying to stop him, but Stephen just downed his drink with a satisfied look. Maybe. But times have changed. It's not like it was when I was young. Well, yeah, your time was decades ago. But even now, women should support their men. By then, I was exasperated and could only manage a weak smile. After we got home, Rachel called to apologize. I'm really sorry, Mom. It's okay. I was glad to meet him. That was true. I was genuinely happy to meet Rachel's boyfriend. But, somehow, I can't fully support it. The thought of him spending his life with Rachel makes it hard for me to give my blessing. Sensing my hesitation, Rachel added an excuse on his behalf. Stephen has been having a tough time at work lately. He's usually much more easygoing. I see. He must be tired. It's understandable. I'm sorry. What if his behavior when drinking was his true nature? They said they were thinking about marriage. But was Stephen really the right one for Rachel? A feeling of unease grew in my chest, but I couldn't voice it to Rachel. Although he lacked some sensitivity, there wasn't enough evidence to outright criticize him. I guess I'll just have to keep watching for now. I sighed as I spoke to myself. I thought I would observe for a while longer, but then, a few weeks after that meeting, Rachel shared some surprising news. Actually, Stephen proposed to me yesterday. He wants us to visit his parents' house together soon. What? You're getting married? I almost blurted out my doubts about Stephen but chose my words carefully. So, you want to marry Stephen? If Rachel wanted it, could I accept it? Could I let my daughter go while feeling this uneasy? I was tempted to intervene. With a nervous heart, I asked, and after a brief silence, Rachel said in a small voice. Actually, there's something I haven't told you, something that's been bothering me. What? Hearing the truth from Rachel, I decided to take action immediately. For my precious daughter, there was no time to hesitate. A few days later, Rachel and I visited Stephen's parents' house. We're so happy you could come. Stephen walked to the nearest station to meet us. The three of us, Rachel, Stephen, and I, headed to his family's home. My parents are thrilled about the wedding and have been eagerly awaiting it. My mom has already been thinking of Rachel as a real daughter even before meeting her. According to Rachel, she had told them that the marriage plans were still undecided, but Stephen and his parents seemed completely convinced. That's nice. I'm looking forward to meeting them. I tried to keep a neutral expression and smile, preparing myself for what might come. After about a 10-minute walk, we arrived at Stephen's family home. As he said, his parents greeted us with big smiles. Oh my. Such a lovely young lady. You must be Rachel. Nice to meet you, Rachel responded politely with a smile. As I watched in silence, Stephen's mom noticed me and smiled awkwardly. Oh, you must be Rachel's mother. As Rachel and I exchanged uneasy glances, Stephen's father interjected. Come on, Rachel. Hurry inside. Come. Yes, excuse me. It turned out that Stephen's father worked at the same company as Rachel and Stephen, though in a different department, so they hadn't met before today. As I stood there, a bit stunned, Stephen spoke to me with a blank expression. What's wrong? Come on, Mom, please come in. We have a pretty nice house around here, so no need to be shy. Maybe he thought I was overwhelmed by the house. No. I was just surprised by the audacity of your parents. Yes, excuse me. With a simmering irritation, I followed them into the house. As they had proudly mentioned, the house was spacious and well kept. Rachel, it might be a bit overwhelming since it's so different from your home, but don't worry, you'll get used to it. Stephen's mom glanced at me and then put her arm around Rachel's shoulders. Was she implying that our home was shabby because we're a single-parent family? With a house this big, it's a lot of work to clean, but I'm sure Rachel can handle it, right? Growing up in a single-parent family, she must have done a lot of chores. Poor thing. I was tempted to intervene, but I held back. Rachel seemed about to say something, but Stephen's mom didn't give her a chance, quickly ushering her into the living room. You must be hungry. Have a seat, have a seat. On the living room table, there were steaks placed at each seat. I ordered the best steak from the famous local restaurant because Rachel was coming. Today is a special day. Indeed, the steak looked quite expensive. As we were directed to our seats and sat down, Rachel and I immediately noticed that something was wrong. What is this? I pointed to the item placed in front of my seat, and Stephen's family all grinned in unison. There are all kinds of people in the world, you know? You've heard the saying, people from different worlds, right? Today, we wanted to help you and Rachel understand that. Stephen's mom said this with a triumphant voice. Stephen's father and Stephen himself, sitting next to Rachel, watched this scene with amusement. The intention of this family was all too clear, and I couldn't help but laugh cynically. I see. So, you have premium steak in front of you, and I have a cup of chicken noodle soup in front of me. At my words, Stephen clapped his hands in appreciation. Exactly. You get it. The chicken noodle soup represents Rachel and you so far. The premium steak represents our family and Rachel's future. It's a clear metaphor, right? Rachel sat silently, looking down. I remained silent too, glaring intensely at Stephen's family. Perhaps thinking they had won, Stephen's mom continued with an air of superiority. Let's all eat together as a new family. Stephen's family ostentatiously enjoyed their delicious steak. When she noticed me frozen in place, she feigned surprise. I just added hot water to your cup of chicken noodle soup, Natalie, so please wait about 3 more minutes. You're used to this, right? I'm sorry. But we'll start eating. Come on, Rachel, eat up. She peered into Rachel's face. At that moment, Rachel stood up slowly. Stephen's mom looked puzzled. Oh, Rachel, what's wrong? Don't worry, it's fine. Let's eat. From now on, we'll be your family instead of your mother. Rachel gave Stephen's mom a cold stare, ignored her words, and walked briskly to my side, saying in a clear voice. Let's go home. I nodded firmly. All right. As the two of us headed towards the entrance, Stephen hurriedly blocked our way. Rachel. What are you doing? What do you mean? We're going home. We don't want to waste any more time here. Huh? Do you know what you're saying? Stephen raised his voice in frustration and grabbed Rachel's arm. Rachel shook off his hand and shouted. Do you even know what you're doing? Stephen looked momentarily stunned, then snorted. Are you going to start complaining about being disrespected again? This is a kind of ritual for you, for your own good. What? Rachel glared at him, and Stephen shrugged. You always brag about your mom, but she's just a poor single mother, right? And after all these years, she still hasn't remarried. We're offering you a chance to join our wealthy world, so what's the problem? Cannot even remarry, some people do think that way. Indeed, being a single parent often brought disdain and judgment. In truth, I've had admirers. But since my husband passed away, Rachel has been my priority. While remarriage has its benefits, it also has drawbacks. After much contemplation, I decided not to remarry until Rachel was settled. And Rachel knew this. Rachel sighed deeply, looking at Stephen. I thought you were competent at work, but you're a disaster in your personal life. What did you say? As Stephen's face turned red with anger, Rachel furrowed her brow and asked. Are you the type who separates work from personal life? But you should think carefully. You never know where the two might intersect. Are you threatening me? What connection could you and this old lady have with my job? Rachel glanced at me and nodded. It was time to speak up. I turned to Stephen, cleared my throat, and smiled warmly. Actually, even though we're meeting for the first time, your company has a deep connection with my company. Huh? My company? What? The color drained from Stephen's face. What do you mean? Company? Rachel is cautious and didn't mention it, but your company is a subsidiary of my company. When I said, my company, I referred to the company my late husband had founded. My husband, who had a passion for the apparel industry, had planned meticulously since his student days and turned his dream into a reality by starting his own business. The company had been growing steadily, but when my husband passed away halfway through his dream, I took over. I don't have my husband's talent. So at first, I struggled a lot. But I desperately wanted to carry on what my husband had left behind. I believed that if the company stabilized, we would be financially secure. Raising young Rachel while managing the company was tough, but with the help of people around me, our performance gradually improved. Recently, we've been doing exceptionally well. That's impossible. Rachel never mentioned anything about this. Rachel, without even making eye contact, retorted to Stephen, who was nervously looking at her. I don't like getting special treatment by leveraging my mother's status. The only person in our company who knows this is President Johnson. The president? The president knows? Rachel nodded and glanced at me. By the way, President Johnson has always been a fan of my mom. He never approached her because of me, though. Hey, don't say unnecessary things. Actually, after my husband passed away, President Johnson confessed his feelings to me several times. I turned him down, saying I couldn't think about it until Rachel was settled. I was worried it might become awkward, but President Johnson continued treating me normally, and we maintained a good friendship. Stephen's mouth opened and closed, and his eyes darted around nervously. So, you're saying my mother-in-law is the CEO of our parent company? And President Johnson is a fan of hers, what? There's no longer any chance of you marrying Rachel, so please don't call me your mother-in-law. Stephen was completely confused. But that wasn't the end of the discussion. I almost left due to the poor treatment, but there was something else I wanted to ask him. I came here today specifically to ask about this. Stephen, I've heard you're highly regarded at work, but it seems you've been using that to your advantage inappropriately? What? Stephen's face turned pale, and he flinched. He must have known exactly what I was talking about. His eyes wavered uncertainly. I hear you've been hitting on the temp workers indiscriminately. Some might welcome your advances, but how do you know that? Stephen's eyes widened in shock. He glanced at his parents but quickly looked back at me, shaking his head. No, it's a misunderstanding. I only talked to them to improve the workplace atmosphere. His flustered behavior was clearly suspicious. It was hard to believe he could lie so blatantly. If he had approached the temp workers like this, anyone would doubt him. Even I might have been fooled by Stephen's polished exterior when we first met. It's no wonder the temp workers fell for him. He was now desperately trying to make excuses. You even made similar excuses to Rachel, right? Rachel, being straightforward and serious, believed you. Although she believed him, she became anxious about marriage and consulted me. I was very worried after hearing the details from Rachel. After your proposal, I hired a private investigator to look into you. That's an invasion of privacy. Stephen was visibly distressed. Even without his reaction, the results were damning. Stephen had been involved with multiple women. Some were even led to believe their contracts would be extended. You don't have that authority, yet you misled them. They were deceived and hurt. Stephen trembled, looking down, but suddenly raised his head and shouted. So what? If it motivates them to work harder, what's the problem? I'm doing something good for the company. He didn't even show any sign of remorse. Instead, he was defensive and even defiant. I was amazed at his audacity. How many temp workers had been manipulated by this man? Temp workers are entrusted to you by the client company. You've looked down on them, but they don't deserve your disdain. Oh, please. That's just pretty talk. Temp workers are those who couldn't make it as full-time employees. They're a bunch of lower-tier people. We full-time employees are obviously superior. This man is beyond help. Stephen's parents nodded in agreement behind him, which puzzled me. He must have been raised with this kind of elitist attitude. They compare themselves to others, look down on them, and bask in their sense of superiority. No point in talking to people like that. It might take you some time to understand, but maybe you'll get it quickly if you experience it yourself. What? Oh, when you're unemployed. By your standards, that's lower than a temp worker, right? The bottom tier? Stephen shook his head, looking at me with pleading eyes. I don't understand what you're saying. Do you really think the company will keep you after finding out how you've been exploiting the temp workers? You're fired. President Johnson was furious. No. Please, wait. This can't be real. Stephen reached out to grab my arm, but Rachel intercepted with a chop. Don't touch my mom with those filthy hands. Different worlds? Good. I'm glad I don't live in your disgusting world. No. Wait. Rachel. Stephen was tearful, but Rachel didn't look back. I thought you were a wonderful person at first. I was fooled by you, but I don't feel anything for you anymore. As Rachel took my hand to leave, Stephen's parents blocked our way. Wait. Rachel. Stephen will change, I promise. Yes, he's made mistakes, but he's got a bright future ahead. It would be a waste to leave him now. You'll regret it later. His parents were visibly desperate. Understandable, since Stephen and his father were the breadwinners. If Stephen lost his job, their income would plummet. No more stake for them. Stephen's father had another reason to worry. I stood in front of them and addressed Stephen's father. Did you think you'd get away with it? What do you mean? It's not just Stephen who's been acting foolishly. Like father, like son, right? Stephen's father started sweating. Please, don't tell President Johnson about me. He already knows everything. Good luck with your job search. In this industry, rumors spread fast, so finding new jobs might be tough. Even their way of bowing seemed genetic. Stephen and his father knelt on the floor, heads hanging in defeat. As we left, I glanced back. Even from a distance, their postures were identical. Later, both Stephen and his father were fired. Besides the temp worker issue, they had been involved in various minor frauds. Losing their well-paid jobs, their living standards plummeted. They sold their house and now live in an old apartment. Stake is out of their reach for a while. Stephen and his father had been regarded as competent at work, so their dismissal caused quite a stir. I didn't care about their future. My only concern was whether Rachel was okay. But it seemed I needn't worry. I need more experience. I was fooled because I lacked it. With that mindset, Rachel has been actively going out to dinner with colleagues and acquaintances introduced by friends. I find my daughter's positivity and resilience truly admirable. This is exactly the Rachel I know. As for me, this whole ordeal made Rachel tell me it's time for me to let go. Even though I failed this time, I want you to know that if you find someone you want to marry, please do. I'm 25 now. So there's no need for you to hold back or worry about me. It seems Rachel is still holding on to the fact that Stephen mocked me for being an unmarried widow. I don't necessarily have a desire to remarry, but I do think it would be nice to have someone to spend my later years with. Now that Rachel has encouraged me, maybe I'll accept the next dinner invitation from the gentleman without making excuses. With him I've known for decades, I might just find a happy and peaceful future. That's how I feel.